Welcome to another session of Behind the Process, everyone. Here at RoboHead, where we talk to creative and marketing leaders about how their teams are delivering awesome work, some of the challenges they face, the lessons they learn, and the victories they have. Really excited to in this session to be talking with Stacie Holder at AAA Washington. Stacie, you've been a client for I think almost a decade now. I've had the pleasure of working with you, so thank you so much for joining us. Would love if you could kind of get us started and tell us a little bit about who you are beyond your name and that you're with AAA Washington, and a little bit about your team and what you all are working on and how you're supporting the AAA Washington business.
Yeah, thank you, Will. So I have been with AAA Washington for about 17 years. I'm the marketing production manager. So I'm trying to keep each of and every one of our projects moving along. I have a team of 3 designers and 2 copywriters and a creative manager that I work with. And we do all of the creative for AAA Washington. So we're doing everything from environmental graphics to digital display ads, print pieces, anything and everything we are producing in-house.
Okay, that's awesome. And so really anything from print, digital to web, it's all being produced by your team, from static pieces to videos, GIFs, and anything else that you're doing, any other dynamic content. You're doing everything in-house.
That is correct, yes.
That's awesome. Do you mind talking a little bit about, can you tell me a little bit about the makeup of your team? How many folks you got, writers, designers, videographers? Would love to kind of understand a little bit more about, what the team, who makes up the team.
So I've got a senior graphic designer and a senior copywriter. Both have been with the company for 10 or more years. Oh, wow. And they're so well versed in the company and the culture and our voice. It makes it really easy to bring in new people. So we have 2 newer designers. Okay. Who we brought them in. They have more that video, GIF, kind of social media backgrounds. Okay. So we could get into that space better. And we brought in another copywriter in the last year to really change our voice a bit. She's younger, early 20s, and so we get a fresher voice and a different perspective on really everything. And so the team has gelled fabulously. Awesome. And then we get to play with, social reels and different little small videos that the team really enjoys doing.
That's awesome. I love how you have a nice mix of folks that really understand the brand and the history and what's important to communicate. And then you also have folks that maybe are more comfortable in different newer mediums and things of that nature. And I know you guys went through pretty big rebrand about a year ago now, maybe a year and a half, yes. But within the last year or so. So I'm curious as you kind of talk about this team, as the team and what you all are producing, would love to understand, either from just a simple, like a process standpoint or just a day-to-day standpoint, anything that you're in, what are some of the challenges that you all are facing currently, or maybe you've faced recently that have, been a challenge to just making sure you're delivering what AAA Washington needs to really articulate what the brand is doing in your area?
Yeah. So with that rebrand, we started looking at different ways to reach our customers or potential customers. And so we ended up kind of revamping our our workflows. Because what we were running into is, because of the different mediums and the way things were needed to be produced, things were taking different amounts of time than we were expecting. Gotcha. Because we had done so many things for so long that were print-based. Yeah. You get stuck in that workflow, and so we had to make some changes and really look at how we were doing things, why things seemed to fall behind, where we were missing those key points, where we're not getting the information that we needed in the beginning, those kinds of things. So, and that's kind of what we discovered is we weren't getting all the information up front sometimes. And then the expectations of when things should be delivered from the client side was different than what we were able to deliver. And so we had a few hiccups. And we've been working through those, and a lot of that has been process change and workflow change and adding more touch points between the client and ourselves to make sure we're on target for what they want.
Gotcha. That's really interesting as you're saying that. It's like, so what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm getting this right or not, but maybe one of the initial challenge was, hey, we're doing a lot of new types of content for different mediums. And maybe, I guess at the beginning it would be like, oh, that's a skill we have to develop. That's the biggest problem. But as you got into it, because the turn times or the production times are different, it was really like, oh yeah, we're learning this new thing, but there's actually maybe there's a problem in our scoping process where there's more stuff we could be capturing at the front end, and that's kind of being it's being brought to the forefront because these projects are needing to be done faster. Is that kind of what you're saying, or?
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was all of those things as you get into this new deliverable. It's like, oh wait, we didn't grab this bit of information that we needed up front, or everybody missed the thought. They're like, oh, we're going to need that going forward, and then you start stumbling a little bit in your workflows because you don't have that, and you're chasing down that information, and people are out for vacations or whatever. So, it's just the standard things that you run into all of a sudden become bigger hurdles than you expected.
That's a really amazing, like in my mind, that just the way you said that hit me, because it's like, this is stuff that ideally we would have at the front end of every project. But if it's something that takes 2 weeks or a month or whatever, we'll fill in the blanks as we go. And we've got space built into that project timeline for us to do that. And maybe it's not ideal, but we've got space and time for it where it's breathing, where we can do that. But if you have something that's due tomorrow or the next day, it's like, oh, we don't have that space to just kind of come across it organically. We really need to make sure we're grabbing it on the front end. That's awesome. Yeah. How is you mentioned, that's affected kind of your process and your workflows. Is there one major change that you've made, or what was the first pivot that you said, hey, this is the first big thing that we're going to address and we're going to modify that'll give us the most value for, best bang for the buck, I guess?
Well, it was, what really triggered it was the fact that we were missing some timelines and when our deliverables needed to happen. And
Gotcha.
So we, management had to sit down and said, okay, we got to change. This has got to change. And so we really revamped our whole process for really big projects. So we basically have just created all of our content for the first half of 26 between the end of November and up through the end of January. That's awesome. And really set down, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to talk through what we want. Okay, then we're going to come back in a couple weeks and we're going to talk through the ideas that the designers and writers have for this project and the creative concepts. Gotcha. And we're going to get sign off on that. And then we're going to come back with some initial ads and deliverables and say, okay, this is how that concept's going to iterate out. Is this what you want? And really almost, you think, oh, we'll just go and we'll deliver and we'll come out and we'll hand off the pieces, but really going through that process of making sure everybody's signed off all the way through the process instead of just assuming what we're doing everybody's happy with. And And we had, and I think it's because we had spent so much time in print
Yeah.
years back that that process really had an ingrained proofing to it. Whereas with some of these other things, a size change on a display ad can really impact how that ad looks. And so you're thinking, oh, well, we'll just iterate into that size. Well, then you hand that deliverable off, and the requester is going, that's not what I want this to look like or say, because we've got this tiny little space with just a little bit of copy we can put in it versus something with an image. So it's really getting that fine tuning. And so, and because of that, our process has gotten actually longer,
Yeah.
but we needed that time to really be able to turn the product and the deliverables that our clients are asking for.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then, as you kind of have built in that process, it seems like also maybe there, from a strategic standpoint, there's more planning on the front end for, obviously there's always been a lot of planning, but there, what I guess what I mean is you're being a little more prescriptive about these are the things that we're going to be doing, and maybe the calendar is more filled on the front end, and there's not as much ad hoc stuff that's coming in, or at least we're trying to do that. Is that fair as well?
Yes,
Okay.
very much so. Really making sure that that calendar is locked down and everybody knows where that sits, right? So everybody from the requester to any and everybody that's going to touch that project, or somebody who's just happens to go, hey, where's this at? You can show them a calendar, and it's like, this project is here, this is where it's at, and be able to really show those deliverable or those milestones to everybody so that there's no question of where anything should be at any particular time.
Okay, gotcha. So as I'm hearing that, you're revamping the process, and it's to, kind of the big key things are being very, very deliberate about
Yes.
creating those touch points so that we make sure that everyone's communicating and weighing in when appropriate, not too late,
Yes.
not too early, not randomly, but then also communicating visibility so everyone understands kind of what's at stake. This is all that we're working on. We need to be aware of that. This is kind of our workload. And then this is where each thing is, this is where it's at and when it needs to be done. And just being more deliberate about kind of creating that, defining that process and creating that structure that, provides visibility and kind of a clear understanding of what everyone needs to do and where they're at. Is that
Yes.
okay? Awesome.
Very much.
As your team was kind of going through this, obviously, you're revamping your process. You're maybe planning more of your projects out earlier than perhaps they were in the past, and then you're increasing in some ways the touch points. So you're not, it's, people are coming in with feedback earlier than maybe in the past.
Right.
How's that been received? Has it been something that's been fairly pretty easy for yourself and everyone to adopt, or I would love to kind of understand, what's worked really well, and then if there were any hiccups that you met along the way where you're like, what, this isn't quite right. We need to tweak it.
Yeah, it's for the most part, it's worked really well. Everybody's been really happy with the extra touch points because everybody's like, okay, I feel like I've got a better, from a designer standpoint, they're like, I feel like I'm getting better feedback from the person that's signing off on the project, and that they're getting exactly what, we're giving them exactly what they want. And from the requester side, they're like, yeah, I feel like the designers and the writers are getting what we're saying, so that conversation and those touch points have made just huge strides in the communication. And, I think we found that we've got a couple pieces or a couple points where we may have given a lot of time to a project where we might have been able to shrink it up a little bit, and getting, or we've got a couple that maybe we should have extended a little bit more. We've got some of that play time that we need to start looking at and going, okay, we when we have our initial kickoff on these big projects, okay, are these timelines looking right? Do we think, are we good with shrinking things up if, things go really well and we don't need the extra time? Things like that to make sure that everybody's on the same page and things don't at the end don't fall off because all of a sudden we've lost, we've had too much time to finish up something and then all of a sudden you've moved on to something else and it's getting lost or something. And then we're also finding some of our quicker projects are still stumbling a little bit. They need a little refinement on making sure that they're not getting just left behind because we're working on these bigger projects. So it's really getting that balance of making sure everything is on time and not just what we think is this big focus.
I love that. How, it's everything is important. It may be more or less important, but
Great.
making space within the process to ensure that these things that might be, in the grand scheme of things, like, oh, that's minor. It's like, no, no, no.
Mm.
To the people that have requested it, or to this element of the business, is actually very important. So we need to make space for it, but we've made the right amount of space. And then because we've cleaned the process up on everything, that right amount of space is enough for it to get done when it needs to be done. We're not going to drop it or forget it. So what,
Yeah.
as we, I think a lot of, RoboHead users, as well as just, creative and marketing teams in general, are tasked with doing more types of work. Obviously, most teams are doing similar to what you're doing. They're not just doing web work or digital work or print work or videos. They're doing, a lot of stuff. What's one piece of advice you might have for a group that, or a leader that is maybe a little earlier in the process of trying to figure out how do we actually manage all of this and get it planned out and execute on all, not just the projects we've always done, but this new stuff that we're bringing in when they don't always get, another, a 2x or 3x increase in resources. Or maybe not. They
Yeah.
don't always they never get it. They never get it, right?
Um, the only thing consistent is change. So be prepared for changing the way you're doing things. And be comfortable changing maybe mid flow. When all of a sudden you've discovered that, yeah, we need a couple extra steps here, or we need to tighten this up, or yeah, be prepared to change things. We're doing just that. This process that we kind of started here at the end of 25, we're we're making little tweaks to it here at the start of 26 because we're finding it's like, okay, it's working, but we need little changes to make it even better. So yeah, be comfortable with change.
Okay. I think that's a really good point, in that it's not always massive. Sometimes it's incremental because we're growing. Like, I'm thinking, I had surgery this past year, and it's like it was started with 5-pound weights to recover, and then we moved up, right? And what worked for us last year is not necessarily what's going to work for us going forward. And so, these I always think, like, the process, the workflows, the briefs or the forms, the spec sheets, they're not sacred. They
Right.
they might be sacred in terms of we need them filled out, but they're not sacred in terms of there may be information that we needed that we thought was important last year and it's not this year, or there's stuff
Yeah.
we just picked it up as we went along the way, and now we need to know this on the front end of the project. So I love that about accepting the change and realizing that you changed once, but you're going to change again, and that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you got it wrong. It means the world, your world has changed. You've learned more. There's different demands on you. All of that. So
Yeah, very much so. And yeah, we're like I said, we're continuing to change and find new ways and better ways to do things, or just, like you said, better ways to do what we're being asked to do right now. And that, in 6 months may change again.
absolutely.
Yeah.
This has been excellent, Stacie. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And for those of you that are watching, thanks for tuning into this Behind the Process. And I'm Will Goad with the RoboHead team, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.